My entitled cousin moved into my grandmother's house with her 3 kids and demanded I quit college 1 semester before graduation to be her full-time nanny. When I said no, she started a family war and tried to turn everyone against me. I am Maya, 22F, and I need to get this off my chest because I think I'm losing my mind. 3 weeks ago, my cousin Jessica, 28F, showed up at our family home with her 3 kids, twins who are 5 years old and a 7-year-old. She said she needed a place to stay temporarily after her landlord kicked her out for not paying rent. My grandmother Ruth, 74F, who owns the house, immediately said yes without asking anyone else. I live with my grandmother because I'm finishing my accounting degree at the community college nearby. I also work at a local bank as a part-time teller to pay for my tuition and help with household expenses. My grandmother gets Social Security, but it's not much, so I contribute about $400 monthly for groceries and utilities. We had a good routine going. She watches her soap operas in the afternoon while I study, and I handle most of the cooking and cleaning since her arthritis makes it hard for her. Jessica has always been the family favorite. When we were kids, she got the new clothes while I got hand-me-downs. When she dropped out of high school at 16, everyone said she was just going through a phase. When she had her first kid at 19 with a guy who disappeared, the family rallied around her with money and babysitting help. She's never held a steady job for more than 6 months. The first week after she moved in was chaos. The kids destroyed the living room daily. They drew on the walls with crayons. The 7-year-old broke my grandmother's favorite lamp while running around the house. Jessica just shrugged and said kids will be kids. She spent most of her time on the couch scrolling through her phone while the children screamed and fought with each other. I tried to be understanding. I bought groceries for 5 people instead of 2, which ate up most of my paycheck. I cleaned up after the kids every evening after coming home from work and classes. I even bought new sheets for the guest room where Jessica was sleeping because she said the old ones were scratchy. Then last Monday, everything changed. I was eating breakfast before my 8 a.m. accounting class when Jessica sat down next to me. She said she had been thinking about our living situation and had come up with a solution. She wanted me to quit my job and watch her kids full-time so she could finally get her life together and find proper work. I stared at her like she had grown a second head. I asked her if she was serious. She said absolutely, and that it made perfect sense. She explained that childcare costs around here are expensive, and since I'm family, I should want to help her out. She said I could always go back to school later when her kids were older and in school full-time. I told her no immediately. I said I had 1 semester left before graduating and wasn't about to throw that away. I also mentioned that my job pays well and I needed the money for tuition and to help my grandmother. Jessica's face changed completely. She accused me of being selfish and not caring about family. She said I was just like the rest of our relatives who only cared about themselves. The conversation got heated. Jessica started crying and said she had nowhere else to go. She claimed I was the only person who could help her and that if I really loved her and the kids, I would make this sacrifice. I got up from the table and left for class without saying another word. When I came home that evening, my grandmother was waiting for me in the kitchen. She said Jessica had been crying all day and that maybe I should reconsider helping out. She reminded me that family sticks together and that Jessica was going through a hard time. I explained to my grandmother that I couldn't quit my job and drop out of school with only 1 semester left. My grandmother seemed to understand but said we needed to find some kind of compromise. Over the next few days, Jessica kept bringing up the babysitting arrangement. She would make comments about how tired she was and how hard it was to manage 3 kids alone. She started leaving the children with my grandmother while she went out for hours at a time. My grandmother, who can barely keep up with 1 active child due to her age and health, was exhausted. On Thursday, I came home from work to find my grandmother napping on the couch while the twins were jumping on the furniture and the 7-year-old was in the kitchen trying to make a sandwich with a sharp knife. I quickly intervened and got the kids settled with some snacks and cartoons. When Jessica returned 2 hours later with shopping bags from Target, I asked her where she had been. She said she needed some personal time and had gone shopping for new clothes since her old ones didn't fit well anymore. Friday morning, Jessica cornered me again. This time she had a written schedule. She wanted me to watch the kids from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. She said this would give her time to job hunt and maybe take some online courses to improve her skills. When I asked what I would do about my own job and classes, she suggested I could find online classes and maybe do some remote work in the evenings. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her there was no way I was giving up my degree and my job to be her free babysitter. I said she needed to figure out her own childcare situation. Jessica started yelling at me, saying I was heartless and didn't understand what it was like to be a single mother. She said our grandmother had raised us to help family members in need, and I was failing that basic test. The argument woke up my grandmother, who came shuffling out of her bedroom asking what all the noise was about. Jessica immediately started crying and told my grandmother that I was refusing to help her and the kids. She said I was being cruel and selfish, and that she didn't know what she was going to do. My grandmother looked at me with disappointment and asked if we couldn't work something out. That weekend was miserable. Jessica barely spoke to me except to make sarcastic comments about my selfishness. She told the kids that Aunt Maya didn't want to spend time with them, which made me feel terrible because I do love those children. They started avoiding me and acting cold whenever I tried to interact with them. Sunday evening, Jessica sat me down for another conversation. She said she had been thinking about it all weekend and was willing to pay me for babysitting. She offered $200 per week, which is less than half of what I make at the bank. When I pointed this out, she said I should consider the fact that I wouldn't have transportation costs or work clothes to worry about. She also mentioned that spending time with kids would be good preparation for when I have my own family someday. I told her the money wasn't the main issue. I explained that I was so close to finishing my degree and starting my career in accounting. I said I had already lined up potential job interviews with firms in the area for after graduation. Jessica just rolled her eyes and said college was overrated anyway, and that plenty of successful people never finish school. Yesterday, Jessica announced that she had found a potential job at a retail store but couldn't take it without reliable childcare. She said the position paid $12 an hour and had good potential for advancement. She looked directly at me and said this was my chance to really help the family. When I didn't respond immediately, she added that if I wasn't willing to help, she might have to move away to stay with her ex-boyfriend's mother in another state, and then our grandmother would never see the kids again. My grandmother overheard this conversation and later pulled me aside. She said she didn't want Jessica and the kids to move away, especially since they're the only great-grandchildren she has. She asked if there was any way I could help out, maybe just for a few months until Jessica got on her feet. I could see how much this meant to my grandmother, but I also knew that if I gave in now, there would always be another excuse for why Jessica needed just a few more months of help. I'm supposed to graduate in December. I've worked so hard to get to this point, taking classes while working and helping take care of my grandmother. I've already been accepted into the accounting program at the State University for my bachelor's degree, and I have a partial scholarship. If I drop out now or defer, I might lose that opportunity. But I also see how this situation is affecting my grandmother. She's caught in the middle, and the stress of having 3 young children in the house is wearing her down. Jessica has made it clear that she sees me as the solution to all her problems, and she's not interested in any other options. I don't know what to do. Am I being selfish for not helping my cousin? Should family obligations come before personal goals? I feel like I'm being manipulated, but everyone keeps telling me that family should stick together. I just want to finish school and start my career, but I'm starting to feel guilty for having those goals when Jessica is struggling. Update 1. I thought I should update everyone on what's been happening since my original post. Things have gotten much worse, and I discovered some information that completely changed how I view this situation. First, let me address the advice I got from my original post. Many people suggested I should stick to my boundaries and not give up my education. Others said I should try to find a compromise that might work for everyone. I tried to follow both pieces of advice, but Jessica wasn't interested in compromising. The week after my original post, Jessica continued pressuring me daily about the babysitting arrangement. She started involving the kids in her campaign. She would tell them loudly when I was in the room that she couldn't take them to the park or buy them treats because she didn't have a job, and Aunt Maya wasn't helping her find one. The kids started asking me why I didn't want to help their mom, which broke my heart. My grandmother was getting more exhausted by the day. The kids were waking her up early every morning, and Jessica was leaving them with her for hours while she went out. When I asked Jessica where she was going during these long absences, she always had vague answers about job hunting or running errands. On Tuesday of that week, I decided to try a different approach. I sat down with Jessica and offered a compromise. I said I could watch the kids for a few hours on weekends and maybe one evening per week so she could go to job interviews or handle important appointments. I explained that this was the most I could do while maintaining my work and school schedule. Jessica rejected this offer immediately. She said weekend babysitting wouldn't help her get a full-time job, and that my proposal showed I still didn't understand her situation. She accused me of making token gestures while refusing to provide real help. The conversation ended with her storming out of the room. That weekend, I noticed Jessica was spending a lot of time on her phone, often stepping outside to take calls. When I asked who she was talking to, she said it was potential employers and housing assistance programs. Something about her behavior seemed off, but I couldn't pinpoint what it was. On Monday, I had a late class and didn't get home until after 9 p.m. When I walked in, I found my grandmother sitting at the kitchen table looking upset. The kids were already in bed, and Jessica was nowhere to be seen. I asked my grandmother what was wrong. She told me that Jessica had left that morning saying she had a job interview and would be back by lunch. She never returned, and my grandmother had been watching the kids all day. This was the 3rd time that week Jessica had disappeared for an entire day, leaving my grandmother to handle 3 young children alone. I was furious. My grandmother is 74 years old and has arthritis. Chasing after 3 kids for 12 hours was not something she should be doing. When Jessica finally came home around 11 p.m., I confronted her about abandoning her responsibilities. Jessica claimed she had been at a second interview that ran long, followed by mandatory paperwork for the job. When I asked for details about this position, her story kept changing. First she said it was at a restaurant, then she said it was retail, then she mentioned something about customer service. I started to suspect she was lying about the job interviews entirely. The next day, I did something I probably shouldn't have done. While Jessica was out on another supposed interview and my grandmother was napping, I looked through some papers Jessica had left on the kitchen counter. I found several unpaid bills, including a credit card statement showing she owed over $3,000 and hadn't made a payment in 4 months. There were also past due notices for a storage unit and what looked like paperwork from a payday loan place. But the most shocking discovery was a bank statement showing regular deposits of $800 every 2 weeks for the past 2 months. Jessica had been receiving unemployment benefits this entire time while claiming she was desperately looking for work. According to the dates on the statement, she had been getting these payments since before she moved in with us. I realized that Jessica wasn't actually looking for a job at all. She was collecting unemployment while living rent-free at our house and trying to get me to provide free childcare so she could continue avoiding real responsibilities. All those long absences weren't job interviews, she was probably meeting friends or just enjoying time away from her kids. That evening, I decided to confront Jessica with what I had found. I waited until the kids were asleep and my grandmother had gone to bed. I asked Jessica directly if she was receiving unemployment benefits. Her face went completely white, and she immediately became defensive. She admitted she was getting unemployment but claimed it wasn't enough to live on. She said the amount I saw was before taxes and that most of it went to her storage unit and other expenses. When I pointed out that she wasn't paying rent or groceries while living with us, she said she needed money for clothes and transportation for job hunting. I asked her about all the supposed job interviews she had been going to. Jessica broke down and admitted that she had only been to 2 actual interviews in the past month. She said job hunting was harder than I understood, and she needed time to prepare mentally for each interview. She claimed that leaving the kids with our grandmother gave her the space she needed to focus on finding work. I was incredulous. I told her that our grandmother wasn't a free babysitting service and that she was taking advantage of an elderly woman's kindness. Jessica started crying and said I didn't understand the pressure she was under as a single mother. She said everything she was doing was for her kids and their future. The argument escalated when I told her she needed to start taking responsibility for her children instead of dumping them on our grandmother. Jessica accused me of being jealous that she had kids and I didn't. She said I was using my education as an excuse to avoid family obligations, and that I thought I was better than her because I was still in school. Things got really ugly when Jessica said that our grandmother had confided in her that she was disappointed in how selfish I had become. She claimed our grandmother had said she didn't raise me to put personal ambition above family loyalty. This hit me hard because my relationship with my grandmother means everything to me. I went to my grandmother's room and woke her up to ask if she had really said those things. My grandmother looked confused and upset. She said she had never called me selfish, and that she was proud of how hard I was working in school. She admitted she was tired from watching the kids so much, but she didn't want to complain because she knew Jessica was struggling. When I told my grandmother about Jessica's unemployment benefits, she was shocked. She had been giving Jessica money for gas and other expenses because Jessica claimed she was broke from not working. My grandmother realized she had been manipulated just as much as I had been. The next morning, my grandmother asked Jessica to sit down for a conversation. She told Jessica that she knew about the unemployment benefits and that she was disappointed Jessica had been dishonest. My grandmother said she was too old to be the primary caregiver for 3 young children, and that Jessica needed to make other arrangements during the day. Jessica's response was to pack up her things and announce that she was leaving. She said she couldn't stay somewhere she wasn't trusted or appreciated. She claimed she had other family members who would be happy to help her, unlike us. She spent the day making phone calls and arrangements to move out. I thought this might be the end of the drama, but I was wrong. That evening, Jessica's mother, my Aunt Linda, called my grandmother screaming about how we had kicked Jessica and the kids out onto the streets. Apparently, Jessica had told her that we had given her an ultimatum to either quit school and become a full-time nanny or leave immediately. My grandmother calmly explained the real situation to Aunt Linda, including the lies about job hunting and the unemployment benefits. There was a long silence on the phone before Aunt Linda said she needed to call Jessica and get her side of the story. Within an hour, Aunt Linda called back. She had discovered that Jessica had been telling different versions of events to different family members, trying to get money and sympathy from everyone. Aunt Linda was furious that Jessica had been manipulating our 74-year-old grandmother and trying to sabotage my education. Jessica ended up moving in with a friend temporarily, but not before sending me several nasty text messages blaming me for ruining her life and her children's future. She said I would regret being so selfish when I was older and realized that family was more important than career success. The house has been peaceful for the past week. My grandmother and I have returned to our normal routine, and she seems much more relaxed. I'm back to focusing on my final semester of school without the daily drama and guilt trips. But I keep thinking about those kids. They didn't ask for any of this, and they're the ones who suffer when Jessica makes poor decisions. I worry about what kind of stability they have in their lives and whether Jessica will ever step up as a responsible parent. Update 2: I wasn't planning to post another update, but recent events have been so strange that I need to share what's been happening. The situation with Jessica has taken several unexpected turns, and I've learned some disturbing information about her past behavior with other family members. After Jessica moved out, things were quiet for about 3 weeks. My grandmother and I got back into our normal routine, and I was able to focus on finishing my degree. I had almost forgotten about the drama when Aunt Linda called my grandmother with some surprising news. Jessica had been staying with her friend Sarah, but that arrangement fell apart after just 2 weeks. According to Aunt Linda, Jessica had been expecting Sarah to watch her kids while she went out, just like she had done with my grandmother. When Sarah refused to provide free babysitting and asked Jessica to contribute to household expenses, Jessica accused her of being an unsupportive friend and moved out. After leaving Sarah's place, Jessica went to stay with our cousin Michael and his wife. This lasted exactly 4 days. Michael called Aunt Linda to complain that Jessica was leaving her kids with his wife all day while she disappeared for hours. When they confronted her about it, Jessica claimed she was job hunting and that families should support each other during difficult times. Michael told her she needed to find somewhere else to stay. Aunt Linda was running out of patience with Jessica's behavior. She decided to do some investigating of her own by calling other family members to see if anyone else had dealt with similar situations. What she discovered was shocking. It turns out Jessica has been pulling these same manipulative tactics for years, moving from one family member to another whenever her current living situation becomes uncomfortable. Our cousin Rachel revealed that Jessica had stayed with her family for 3 months 2 years ago, using the same story about being temporarily homeless and needing help getting back on her feet. Rachel said Jessica had pressured her teenage daughter to skip school to babysit while Jessica went out. When Rachel refused to allow this, Jessica accused her of not caring about family and moved out in the middle of the night, taking some of Rachel's jewelry with her. Rachel never reported the theft because she didn't want to cause family drama. Our Uncle Tom shared a similar story. Jessica had lived with his family for 6 months, claiming she was saving money to get her own place. Instead, she spent her unemployment benefits on clothes and entertainment while expecting Tom's wife to provide free childcare. When they finally asked her to contribute to household expenses, Jessica accused them of being greedy and trying to profit from her misfortune. The most disturbing story came from our great-aunt Marie, who is 82 years old. Jessica had stayed with her for 2 months last year, supposedly while waiting for an apartment to become available. Marie, who lives alone and has mobility issues, was essentially turned into a full-time babysitter while Jessica went out partying. When Marie fell and injured her hip trying to chase after one of the kids, Jessica didn't even come home from whatever she was doing to take Marie to the hospital. A neighbor had to call an ambulance. Aunt Linda was horrified to learn about the pattern of Jessica's behavior. She realized that Jessica had specifically targeted elderly and vulnerable family members who would be less likely to stand up to her demands. Linda decided it was time for a family intervention. Linda organized a meeting with several relatives who had been affected by Jessica's behavior. They decided to stop enabling her and agreed that no one would take her in unless she agreed to specific conditions, including getting a job, contributing to household expenses, and being responsible for her own childcare arrangements. When they presented this united front to Jessica, her reaction was explosive. She accused the entire family of ganging up on her and her children. She said we were all heartless people who didn't understand what it meant to struggle. She claimed she was being punished for being a single mother and that our conditions were unreasonable and discriminatory. Jessica's response to the family meeting was to disappear entirely. She stopped answering calls from family members and deleted her social media accounts. For 2 weeks, no one knew where she and the kids were staying. Aunt Linda was frantic with worry about her grandchildren. Then last Monday, I got a call at work from my grandmother. She was crying and could barely speak. When I finally understood what she was saying, I left work immediately and rushed home. Jessica had shown up at our house that morning while I was at work and my grandmother was alone. She brought all 3 kids and several suitcases, claiming she had been evicted from wherever she was staying and had nowhere else to go. She told my grandmother that I had agreed she could come back temporarily until she figured out her next steps. My grandmother, who is too trusting and was caught off guard, let them in. By the time I got home, Jessica had already unpacked and made herself comfortable in the guest room again. The kids were running around the house, and my grandmother looked exhausted and overwhelmed. When I confronted Jessica about lying to my grandmother, she denied saying I had agreed to anything. She claimed she had simply told my grandmother that she hoped I would be more understanding this time around. She said she was desperate and had no other options, and that surely I wouldn't throw 3 innocent children out on the street. I told Jessica she needed to leave immediately. I explained that nothing had changed since the last time she was here, and that I still wouldn't be providing free childcare. Jessica started crying and begging, saying she just needed a few days to make other arrangements. She promised she wouldn't ask me to babysit and would handle all her own responsibilities. My grandmother, who felt bad for the children, asked if they could stay just for 1 night while Jessica figured out where to go next. Against my better judgment, I agreed to 1 night only. That was 5 days ago. Jessica is still here, and she's already falling back into her old patterns. Yesterday I came home from classes to find my grandmother watching all 3 kids while Jessica was nowhere to be found. When Jessica returned after dark, she claimed she had been at the library applying for jobs online. I checked the browser history on my grandmother's computer, which Jessica had been using. Instead of job applications, I found evidence that she had been on dating websites and social media for hours. She wasn't job hunting at all, she was trying to find her next victim to move in with. This morning, Jessica cornered me in the kitchen and started her familiar routine about needing help with childcare so she could work. When I reminded her that she had promised not to ask me for babysitting help, she said circumstances had changed and that I was being inflexible about family emergencies. I realized that Jessica will never change her behavior as long as family members continue to enable her. She sees our kindness as weakness and our boundaries as suggestions rather than firm limits. Every time someone gives her another chance, she interprets it as permission to resume her manipulative tactics. I've decided that enough is enough. I called Aunt Linda and told her about Jessica's latest deception. Linda was furious that Jessica had lied to get back into our house and was already breaking her promises. We agreed that it's time for some tough love. Tomorrow, Linda is coming over to have a final conversation with Jessica. We're going to give her a choice: either she moves out voluntarily and starts taking responsibility for her own life, or we'll have to take more serious steps to protect my grandmother from further manipulation. I know this sounds harsh, but Jessica has proven that she cannot be trusted to keep her word or respect other people's boundaries. My grandmother's health and well-being have to come first, and I refuse to sacrifice my education for someone who has no intention of ever becoming self-sufficient. The saddest part is that Jessica's children are paying the price for her poor decisions and manipulative behavior. They deserve stability and a mother who puts their needs above her own convenience, but Jessica seems incapable of providing that kind of responsible parenting. Update 3: This will be my final update on the Jessica situation. The past month has been intense, but I think we finally reached a resolution that protects my grandmother and gives me peace of mind about my own future. The confrontation with Aunt Linda happened exactly as planned. Linda arrived at our house on a Saturday morning when Jessica couldn't claim she was out job hunting. Linda brought her husband Uncle Rick for support, and they sat Jessica down for a serious conversation about her pattern of behavior and the lies she had been telling. Jessica's initial response was to deny everything and play the victim. She claimed she was being unfairly targeted because she was a struggling single mother. She said the family was holding her to impossible standards and that everyone was conspiring against her. Linda calmly presented the evidence of Jessica's deception, including the dating website activity and the lies about job searching. When faced with concrete proof of her dishonesty, Jessica changed tactics. She broke down crying and said she was overwhelmed and didn't know how to handle her situation. She claimed she had been making poor choices because she was desperate and scared about her future. She promised she would do better if given another chance. Linda and Uncle Rick presented Jessica with an ultimatum. She had 2 weeks to find alternative housing and employment. During those 2 weeks, she would be responsible for her own childcare and could not leave the children with my grandmother for more than 2 hours at a time. She also had to provide proof of job applications and interviews to Aunt Linda every few days. Jessica agreed to these terms, but I could tell she was just buying time and planning her next move. Over the following week, she made a show of looking responsible by staying home with her kids and claiming to apply for jobs online. However, I noticed she was also making a lot of phone calls and sending numerous text messages when she thought no one was watching. On Thursday of that week, I discovered what Jessica had really been doing. I overheard a phone conversation where she was telling someone that she just needed a place to stay for a couple of months while she got her life together. She was making promises about contributing to expenses and being responsible, using the same script she had used on every other family member. It became clear that Jessica had found her next target. She was planning to move in with someone else and repeat the same cycle of manipulation and exploitation. The thought of her victimizing another unsuspecting person made me sick, but I also realized there wasn't much I could do to stop her. The next morning, Jessica announced that she had found a solution to her housing problem. A friend from high school had offered to let her and the kids stay temporarily while she got back on her feet. Jessica seemed excited about this new opportunity and claimed this friend really understood her situation and wanted to help. My grandmother and I were both relieved that Jessica would be leaving, but I felt bad for whoever was about to become her next victim. I considered trying to warn this person about Jessica's history, but I didn't even know who they were or how to contact them. Jessica moved out the following Monday. She was surprisingly pleasant during her last few days with us, probably because she knew she had secured her next living arrangement. She even thanked my grandmother for her hospitality and promised to keep in touch. My grandmother, being the kind person she is, hugged Jessica goodbye and told her she hoped things would work out for her and the children. After Jessica left, the house felt peaceful again. My grandmother and I returned to our normal routine without the daily stress and drama. I was able to focus on my final exams and graduation preparations without constant interruptions and guilt trips. I graduated 3 weeks ago with my associate degree in accounting. My grandmother was so proud she cried during the ceremony. I've already been accepted to transfer to the state university for my bachelor's degree, and I start classes next month. I also got promoted to a full-time position at the bank with better pay and benefits. The Jessica situation taught me a lot about setting boundaries and not letting people manipulate me with guilt trips about family obligations. I learned that helping someone doesn't mean sacrificing your own goals and future, especially when that person has no intention of becoming self-sufficient. My grandmother has been much happier and healthier since Jessica left. She admitted that having 3 young children in the house was exhausting and stressful for someone her age. She said she loves her great-grandchildren but recognizes that she's not able to be their primary caregiver. We haven't heard from Jessica directly since she moved out, but Aunt Linda has been getting updates through the family network. Apparently, Jessica lasted about 3 weeks with her high school friend before that arrangement fell apart too. According to the reports, Jessica was expecting her friend to provide free babysitting while she went out, and she wasn't contributing to household expenses despite promises to do so. Jessica is now staying with yet another person, someone she met through a single mother support group. I suspect this pattern will continue indefinitely until Jessica faces real consequences for her behavior or until she runs out of people willing to enable her. The most heartbreaking part of this whole situation is thinking about Jessica's children. They're being dragged from place to place, never having real stability or security. They don't have a stable home, consistent school attendance, or reliable caregivers. Jessica's inability to take responsibility for her own life is robbing her children of the childhood they deserve. I sometimes wonder if I should have done more to help, but I've come to understand that enabling Jessica's behavior wouldn't have actually helped her or her children. Real help would require Jessica to acknowledge her problems and commit to changing her behavior, something she has consistently refused to do. Looking back on this experience, I'm grateful that I stood firm on my boundaries despite the family pressure and guilt trips. If I had given in to Jessica's demands, I would have sacrificed my education and career prospects for someone who had no intention of becoming independent. I would have become another enabler in Jessica's cycle of manipulation. My advice to anyone dealing with a similar situation is to trust your instincts about manipulation and don't let family obligations override your own well-being and goals. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's destructive behavior, even if it creates temporary conflict and drama. I'm now focused on my future and continuing my education. My grandmother and I have a peaceful home again, and I'm proud that I didn't compromise my goals to accommodate someone else's refusal to take responsibility for their own life. The Jessica chapter of our lives is closed, and we're both better off for it. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. My sister's boyfriend was blackmailing our mom over her gambling addiction and she let him terrorize our family to keep her secret. I'm using a throwaway as this is causing major issues in our family right now and I don't want anyone involved finding my main account. Names changed for privacy. This is a long post but I need to give proper background so everyone understands how we got here. I, 36F, met Penelope in high school when we were both 17. She was already out and proud while I was still deep in the closet, mostly because my family was somewhat traditional. Penelope and I became close friends first, but there was always something more between us. I spent those early years struggling with my identity while watching her live her truth openly. She never pushed me to come out, just supported me through everything. When I finally came out at 21, my family had mixed reactions. Mom was uncomfortable at first but came around eventually. Dad surprised everyone by being immediately supportive. He said he'd suspected for years and was just waiting for me to be ready to tell him. Sarah was only 12 then and didn't really understand, but she grew up knowing Penelope as part of our family. Penelope and I got married in 2019 after being together for 15 years. We wanted kids but weren't sure how to go about it until life made the decision for us in the most tragic way. Penelope's best friend Tess became pregnant in 2020. She was single and scared but determined to keep the baby. Penelope supported her through everything, went to every appointment, helped set up the nursery, was even in the delivery room when Jack was born. Tess was an amazing mom to Jack for his first year. What none of us knew was that she had an undiagnosed heart condition. In 2021, she went to sleep one night and never woke up. Penelope was the one who found them, Jack alone in his crib, crying and hungry, and Tess in her bed. I'll never forget her phone call to me that day. She was hysterical, trying to care for Jack while waiting for the paramedics. The image still haunts her. We adopted Jack as Tess had no family able to take him. Her parents had passed away years ago, and her only sister was dealing with addiction issues. We raise him as our own but keep Tess's memory alive. He has photos of her in his room and knows she's his first mommy who lives in heaven now. Now about Sarah and Steve. My sister met him at university 8 years ago. She was 19, and he was 20. From the first time we met him, something felt off. He has this way of making subtle digs at people while maintaining plausible deniability. He'll say something cruel and then claim he's just being honest or that people are too sensitive. For example, at their first family dinner with us, he commented on how Penelope and I wouldn't know what real parenting was like since we couldn't have our own kids. This was before Jack, and we were struggling with fertility decisions at the time. When Penelope got upset, he said he was just stating facts and that we were being oversensitive. My dad can't stand him. There have been countless incidents where Steve has made inappropriate comments about Dad's age or questioned his decisions about retirement. Penelope usually ignores him, but occasionally she'll respond with clever comebacks that make Dad laugh. Like when Steve complained about Dad's new car being too expensive for a retiree, Penelope asked if Steve was worried about his inheritance already. Mom tries to keep the peace by changing the subject whenever Steve starts up. My grandparents hate him too, but they're old school and believe in being polite to guests. Even they have their limits though, especially my granddad who's normally the quietest person I know. Last weekend was rough as it was the anniversary of Tess's death. Penelope, Jack, and I visited her grave on Saturday. Penelope always struggles this time of year, But she tries to stay strong for Jack. She sat by the grave telling Jack stories about his first mom while I watched them from a distance, giving them space. On Sunday, we had our regular family gathering at my parents' house. These happen every few months as a way to keep everyone connected. Usually, they're pleasant enough as long as Steve behaves himself. Penelope was still quiet from the previous day, and my dad noticed. They've always had a special bond. He treats her like another daughter. They went for a walk together, something they often do when either of them needs to talk. Steve apparently took issue with this. He demanded to know why he wasn't invited on their walk, acting like a child excluded from a game. I explained about Tess's anniversary and how Penelope was having a hard time. His response was that she should be over it by now since it had been 3 years. My granddad, who rarely speaks up, said that his best friend had died 20 years ago and he still had days where the loss felt fresh. Steve shut up then, but you could tell he was seething. When Penelope and Dad returned, she seemed better. We all sat down for our late lunch, and things were going fine until Steve tried to insert himself into Penelope's conversation with my granddad about Christmas markets. When they didn't immediately include him in their plans, he exploded. He shouted across the table about how Penelope was manipulating everyone with her grief, that she was getting all the attention because her friend died 3 years ago, and that we all needed to get over it. He even threw in a few swear words, which my grandparents hate. The whole table went silent. I expected Penelope to lose it. She's usually calm but protective of Tess's memory. Instead, she looked at him with this eerily calm expression and said they hadn't even been talking about Tess, just making plans for the Christmas markets. Then she absolutely destroyed him. She told him that everyone in the family hates him because he's toxic and narcissistic. That family gatherings are actually enjoyable when he can't make it. She pointed out that he has no friends outside of Sarah, and even his own family can't stand to be around him. The final blow was when she said that Tess had made more impact in her 32 years than Steve could in 150, and that Tess's funeral was packed with people who loved her while he'd be lucky if Sarah showed up at his. After that bombshell, Penelope went to the garden and I followed. My dad made Sarah and Steve leave, which was the right call. When we came back inside, Penelope apologized to everyone for losing her composure, but nobody except Mom thought she needed to apologize. Dad even made a joke about a lesbian being the one to tell him straight, which broke the tension and got everyone laughing. Yesterday, Sarah called demanding an apology from Penelope, threatening that she and Steve wouldn't come to Christmas otherwise. I reminded her we wouldn't be there anyway as we're spending it with Penelope's mom this year. She got really upset, insisting Penelope was out of line and needed to apologize. I refused, telling her I agreed with everything Penelope said. Today, Dad called asking if Penelope's mom would mind extra guests for Christmas. Apparently, Sarah had called Mom ranting, and Mom told Dad to make Penelope apologize. They had a huge fight about it, and now Dad's refusing to spend Christmas with Steve, even if it means damaging his relationship with Sarah. My granddad's joining us too. Mom's furious, saying Dad and Penelope are destroying the family. Penelope offered to apologize just to keep peace in the family, but I told her absolutely not. Everything she said was true, and I'm tired of everyone walking on eggshells around Steve just because Sarah loves him. I need advice from anyone who's dealt with toxic family members. How do we move forward from here? I can't see any way to make this work without someone getting hurt. Update 1: I never expected things to escalate this badly, but here we are. The situation has gotten much worse, and I need to share what happened last night. Since my last post, the family has been in complete chaos. Sarah has been sending endless texts to everyone, switching between guilt-tripping and angry accusations. She sent messages to our entire extended family about how Penelope disrespected Steve and how I'm choosing my wife over my own sister. Mom has been calling daily, leaving voicemails about how we're tearing the family apart during the holidays. Dad and Granddad have been amazing through all this. They've been shutting down anyone who tries to pressure us into apologizing to Steve. Dad even went off on Mom when she suggested that maybe Penelope was still unstable from Tess's death and that's why she lashed out at Steve. He told her she was being cruel and that she needed to stop enabling Steve's behavior. Last night everything came to a head. Penelope and I were home with Jack, having a quiet evening. Penelope was on the floor playing blocks with him while I was in the kitchen making dinner. Around 7 p.m., there was aggressive knocking at our door. Before I could even reach it, I heard Sarah's voice demanding we open up. I looked through the peephole and saw both Sarah and Steve standing there. I opened the door but kept the security chain on. Sarah immediately started crying, saying we needed to talk this out as a family. I told them this wasn't the time or place, and they needed to leave. Steve then did something I never expected. He literally shoulder-checked the door, breaking the security chain. The noise scared Jack, who started crying. Penelope immediately took him upstairs to his room while I pulled out my phone to call the police. Steve barged into our living room, shouting about how Penelope had ruined everything. He was red-faced and looked like he'd been drinking. Sarah followed him in, still crying and saying we just needed to talk. I was simultaneously trying to call the police and my dad, who lives just 10 minutes away. Steve started ranting about how Penelope had humiliated him in front of everyone, how she'd turned the family against him, and how we were discriminating against him because he was straight. He threatened to sue us for defamation and said he'd make sure everyone knew what kind of person Penelope really was. The whole time, Sarah just stood there wringing her hands and occasionally saying, "Steve, please calm down," in this weak voice that made me want to shake her. This was my little sister, who used to come to me for everything, and now she was just standing there while her boyfriend terrorized my family. What really got me was when Steve started shouting up the stairs, telling Penelope to come down and face him like a real man. The blatant homophobia in his words just confirmed everything Penelope had said about him at the family gathering. I could hear Jack crying upstairs and Penelope trying to comfort him, which made me even angrier. Dad arrived before the police. The moment he walked in and saw Steve screaming up our stairs, something in him snapped. Dad might be 62, but he still goes to the gym 3 times a week. He grabbed Steve by the collar and literally dragged him out of our house. Sarah followed them, screaming at Dad to let go of Steve. The police arrived just as Steve was threatening to press charges against Dad for assault. They took statements from everyone, and when they heard how Steve had broken in and was screaming at my wife and child, they asked if we wanted to press charges. We didn't hesitate to say yes. We're filing for a restraining order first thing tomorrow. The police officer suggested we gather any previous threatening messages or emails from Steve to support our case. They also documented the damage to our door. After everyone left, Mom showed up. Instead of asking if we were Penelope or how Jack was doing, she immediately started berating us for involving the police. She said we were overreacting and that Steve was just emotional and trying to make things right. When I asked how she knew where we lived, we'd moved recently and deliberately hadn't shared our new address with Sarah, she admitted she'd given it to them. I was furious. We'd kept our address private specifically because of Steve, and Mom had just handed it over without our permission. When Dad found out, he lost it. He told Mom she'd betrayed our trust and put her grandchild in danger. Mom tried to defend herself, saying she was just trying to help them patch things up, but Dad wasn't having it. Now the family is completely split. Dad, Granddad, and Penelope's family are firmly on our side. Mom, Sarah, and a few of our aunts are saying we're being dramatic and should just apologize to keep the peace. They keep insisting that Steve has changed and deserves another chance, completely ignoring the fact that he just broke into our home and terrified our child. We've installed security cameras and changed all our locks. Jack is now afraid to be downstairs alone and gets scared whenever someone knocks on the door. He keeps asking if the angry man is coming back. It breaks my heart to see him like this. Penelope is blaming herself, saying if she hadn't confronted Steve at the family gathering, none of this would have happened. I keep telling her she did nothing wrong. Steve is the one who couldn't handle being called out on his behavior. Dad says the same thing, but I can see this is weighing heavily on her. I've blocked Sarah and Mom's numbers for now, and we're speaking to them only through our lawyer about the restraining order. The whole situation is a mess, and I can't believe it's gotten to this point. How did we go from a family disagreement to having to file police reports and restraining orders? I'm dreading the holidays now, even though we're spending them with Penelope's family. The whole situation just feels surreal. Update 2: I need to share some shocking developments in our family situation. What started as drama over Steve's behavior has uncovered something much darker, and now I understand why Mom was so desperate to keep Steve happy. 2 weeks ago, Dad was going through their joint accounts to prepare for tax season when he noticed large unexplained withdrawals over the past 2 years. When he confronted Mom about it, she broke down and revealed everything. She's been gambling for the past 3 years, mostly online poker and sports betting. She's deep in debt, we're talking about nearly $50,000. The worst part? Steve found out about her gambling about 2 years ago. Instead of telling anyone, he started lending her money to cover her losses. He'd give her a few thousand here and there, always making sure to document everything with promissory notes. Mom kept accepting his help, thinking she'd win it back eventually. Now he basically owns her, threatening to demand immediate repayment if she doesn't help him fix things with the family. This explains why Mom was so insistent on us apologizing to Steve, why she gave him our new address, and why she's been defending his behavior. She's terrified he'll expose her gambling or demand all the money back at once. Dad is devastated. They've been married for 40 years, and she's been lying to him for years. Sarah found out about this at the same time we did. She came to our house yesterday, alone this time, crying and apologizing. Apparently, she knew Steve was lending Mom money but thought it was for home repairs. She had no idea about the gambling or how Steve was using it as leverage. Finding out that her boyfriend was essentially blackmailing her mother has finally opened her eyes to who he really is. The restraining order was granted last month, but Steve keeps finding ways around it. He creates new email addresses to contact us, uses different phone numbers to call, and even tried to reach Penelope through her work LinkedIn profile. He's gone from demanding an apology to making threats about exposing family secrets. Last week, he started spreading rumors at Penelope's workplace. He contacted several of her colleagues through social media, suggesting that she's mentally unstable because of Tessa's death and that's why she attacked him at the family gathering. He even implied that we shouldn't have custody of Jack because of Penelope's issues. Thankfully, Penelope's boss is supportive and has documented everything for our lawyer. Dad has moved in with us temporarily. He can't stand being in the house with Mom knowing she's been lying to him for years. He's talking about divorce, something I never thought I'd hear from my parents. The gambling and lies are bad enough, but giving Steve ammunition to use against the family was the final straw for him. Granddad has been our rock through all of this. He comes over almost every day to spend time with Jack, taking him to the park or reading stories. Jack adores him, and it's helping him feel secure again after Steve's break-in. The other day, Granddad got emotional and told me that in all his years, he's never seen someone cause as much damage to a family as Steve has. Mom tried to come by last week to explain herself, but we wouldn't let her in. She's still more worried about Steve exposing her gambling than about what she's done to the family. She left a long letter in our mailbox, mostly justifying her actions and begging us not to let Dad divorce her. She barely mentioned Jack or how her actions put him in danger when she gave Steve our address. Sarah is staying with friends right now, saying she needs time to think about her relationship with Steve. She's finally seeing all the red flags we tried to point out over the years. The way he isolated her from her friends, how he always needed to be the center of attention, how he used information as leverage against people. I feel like I'm watching my family implode, but at the same time, I'm relieved that the truth is finally coming out. All those years of Steve's toxic behavior, and it turns out he was even worse than we thought. He wasn't just a rude, attention-seeking bully, he was actively manipulating and blackmailing our mother. Penelope is handling everything with incredible grace, but I know this is hard on her. The stuff Steve's saying about her mental health and Tess is particularly cruel. She started documenting everything in case we need to take legal action beyond the restraining order. Dad's meeting with a divorce lawyer next week. He says he can forgive the gambling, but he can't forgive Mom choosing to protect Steve over her own grandchild's safety. I never thought our family would end up like this, but I guess you never really know what people are capable of until they show you. Update 3. This will be my final update on the situation. A lot has happened in the past 3 months, and I think it's time to share how everything turned out. Dad went through with the divorce after discovering Mom had taken out several loans in his name to cover her gambling debts. She'd forged his signature on loan documents, which made his decision final. The divorce proceedings revealed she owes over $80,000 to various lenders, including $15,000 to Steve. Dad had to refinance their house to pay off the loans in his name, but he's done supporting her financially. Sarah finally left Steve last month. The breaking point came when she found emails between him and Mom where he'd explicitly threatened to ruin our family if Mom didn't help him get back into everyone's good graces. He'd been documenting everything for years, keeping evidence of Mom's gambling and loans as insurance. Sarah said reading those emails made her physically sick. She couldn't believe she'd wasted 8 years with someone so manipulative. Steve didn't take the breakup well. He tried to use the evidence against Mom anyway, but by then everyone already knew about the gambling. When that didn't work, he started showing up at Sarah's workplace. She had to get her own restraining order after he slashed her tires. Mom moved in with Aunt Linda and claims she's getting help for her gambling addiction. She sends emails every few weeks, usually when she's feeling guilty. They're always the same, apologizing for the loans but defending giving Steve our address because she just wanted the family to heal. She still doesn't seem to understand the gravity of putting Jack in danger. Dad found a small apartment near us and sees Jack almost every day. The divorce was hard on him, but he's doing better now. He joined a gym with Granddad and started taking cooking classes. Penelope's mom has practically adopted him. She invites him over for dinner twice a week and they've become great friends. It's nice seeing him smile again. Penelope decided to look for a new job after Steve's smear campaign at her workplace. Even though her boss was supportive, the rumors affected some client relationships. She found a better position at a larger company with better pay, so Steve actually did her a favor in the end. The new company even offers better adoption benefits, which we're considering using in the future. Jack is doing much better after 6 months of play therapy. He's not afraid of visitors anymore, though he still prefers when people call before coming over. He asks about Mom sometimes, but he's happy spending time with Penelope's mom and dad. Granddad is still his favorite person. They have a standing date every Saturday morning for pancakes and cartoons. We've maintained no contact with Mom and blocked anyone who tried to defend Steve's actions or pressure us into reconciling. Some family members think we're being too harsh, but they weren't there when Steve broke down our door and terrified our son. They didn't see how Mom chose protecting Steve over Jack's safety. Sarah is in therapy now and has apologized to Penelope multiple times. We're cautiously rebuilding our relationship with her, but it's going to take time. She's focusing on herself right now, got a promotion at work and started taking classes to finish her degree. Sometimes I feel sad about how everything turned out, especially for my parents. 40 years of marriage ended because Mom couldn't admit she needed help. But I know we made the right choice standing our ground. Our family is smaller now, but it's stronger and healthier without the toxic influences. Steve still tries to contact us occasionally through new numbers or emails, but we document everything and forward it to our lawyer without responding. The latest we heard, he moved back in with his parents in another state. Good riddance. Penelope and I are focusing on our future now. We're considering adopting another child once Jack is a bit older. After everything that's happened, we've learned that family isn't about blood or obligation, it's about choosing to love and protect each other, no matter what.